Hello and welcome. Now I'm losing slight track, but I think we're up to number 5 in our series of AutoTalk live COVID lockdown videos from my dark, dingy spare bedroom. But let's not let the setting kind of get in the way. We do have some great content, and particularly today, we have someone who is a business consultant, but actually has quite a long run of experience within the automotive trade, particularly on the finance side. Now I'll just click the button and bring her in and welcome Lani Fogelberg of Fogelberg Consulting. Hello, Lani.
Good morning.
How are you holding up there? I think you're in the middle of town, so you're surrounded by quite a few places of interest. Have you had a test?
Yeah, I have not needed to have a test yet. I'm cautiously waiting for my gym to be named as a location of interest, which is sort of quite near all the university campuses. And as I sit right now, I can see at least half a dozen locations of interest. So this one's a wee bit too close to home for my liking.
Right. Well, just stay there and get onto the countdown delivery queue, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right.
Now, can you just tell me a little bit first about Fogelberg Consulting and what you're doing? And I think you've got a bit of an interesting project underway, and that you've got a facility out at Hampton Downs.
I do. And if it weren't for this lockdown, I'd probably be out there right now. But I set up Fogelberg Consulting when I left work a couple of years ago when people asked me to come in and consult on a couple of projects. And essentially, how that's evolved throughout the pandemic is really working with high growth companies, people who have very clear objectives, whether that be a financial objective or an exit or succession plan, and then really breaking that down into how they're going to achieve it over X period of time. And so I provide them with the tools that they need to be able to do that, and of course the accountability, which is what a lot of people generally need, is that kick up the behind to actually get stuff done.
So helping businesses is kind of your thing, and we're kind of at a point where we're helping businesses, and businesses thinking about how they're going to get through this is really important. And I just want to preface what we're talking about today by making it very clear that while Lani is very much a professional, this podcast does not necessarily replace professional advice, and that kind of echoes with the fact that people really should be staying in touch with their management consultants or their accountants or their bank manager at this point. It really is a good time to make sure you're listening to advice, isn't it, Lani?
Oh, it absolutely is. And every business is unique. And that's why it is so important to make sure that the advice that you get is pertinent to your own business.
Well, let's today talk about the support that is available to businesses. And we'll start off at the fairly obvious point that has been quite prominent and is costing a bit of money out there, and that is the wage subsidy. Now, the wage subsidy has been brought back into play. Businesses, I mean, how quickly should they have been looking at getting that? And have you got any tips or thoughts about who and how people should be applying for it?
Yeah, the main thing is making sure that you've got your head around your numbers, so that if you're audited, which as we know from last year, you most likely will be, you can prove that you do meet the eligibility criteria. And that's changed significantly since last year. They've upped the threshold in terms of how much of a revenue decrease you've had to have or are expecting to have as a result of the alert level change. So that is not necessarily the easiest thing for business owners to calculate. And as you say, Richard, that's where it is quite important for people to reach out to their accountant to get assistance with that if they need it. There are a number of tools and calculators to help you do it, but you still need the financial data in the first place.
Yeah. When they say a drop in your revenue, I mean, does it matter necessarily if that revenue is delayed? I mean, for a lot of car dealers, it may, if this is a relatively short lockdown, it may be a case of that their overall deliveries in the long run don't change dramatically, so their total revenue for the year may not change dramatically, but certainly they're stuck without cash coming in for a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's it. It really becomes a cash flow issue for car dealers, right? Because over a period of time, particularly not just 1 week, but if it's 2 or 3 weeks that we end up, and as we all suspect, we will end up being in an increased alert level for, that's quite a significant amount of time that they're still needing to pay wages, needed to pay rent for the premises, other operating expenses as well. So even if a lot of the takings that they would have normally had over that period are just delayed until October or November, they still are going to potentially end up with that cash flow issue. And that's what's going to to potentially, be the straw that breaks the camel's back for a lot of dealerships. So the general consensus out there is that even if the revenue is, potentially going to be realized later in the year, it is based on actually, what are you generating in the wage subsidy assessment period, and what would you normally have generated, a month prior, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about this I heard someone suggest in another meeting was that if you are marginal, you are better off applying for it, and then potentially you can return it later. Is that a line of thought that you agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always pay it back. I know of quite a few people who did that last year because it transpired that, hey, they really just didn't need it, and that didn't sit well with them, even if they did qualify. Or if it does transpire later that actually your calculations were marginal and a little bit too marginal, shall we say. So that is always an option. And look, that proactive approach is not frowned upon at all if you do choose to repay it later on.
Yeah. So the penalty is paying it back as opposed to anything more significant.
Unless you are audited and you genuinely, rigged the numbers. But if it was marginal, there's a little bit of give there.
Yeah. Now, I know this isn't necessarily going to be an issue for many car dealers because simply the doors are shut, but perhaps in the cases of workshops or logistics firms in the system, there are payments if staff have to self-isolate. And I know with the rapidly rising number of contacts out there are a lot of people self-isolating. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different payments. One of them is the short-term absence payment. So that's available for employers, including self-employed people. That's an important point to note. If, say, you're a business, as you say, like a workshop or some kind of logistics support or transport support provider, and you've got people who are having to stay at home and they can't actually work at home, and they're awaiting a COVID-19 test result, then you may be eligible for that payment, and also a leave support scheme. So likewise, if people are forced to take leave as a result of falling ill with COVID, and obviously everyone's getting shipped off to the Jet Park MIQ in that instance if they are positive. So that's another type of payment relating to staff absence as a result of COVID-19 that at the moment some employers would be eligible for. The number of employers who would be eligible for that would actually increase as their alert levels go down, because obviously at the moment we've got a very limited number of businesses who can operate, whereas when we're at level 3, more businesses can open up, more employers are going to be susceptible to that risk.
And that's a payment that you can be eligible for regardless of turnover, is that correct? It's more just about whether that staff member needs to be at home.
It's more to do with that staff member having to be at home. If they can work from home, then that eligibility does not apply.
Mm-hmm. The other payment that's also come up this time, which was less talked about last year, is the resurgence payment. I'm not sure I'm recalling that correctly.
Yeah, the resurgence support payment. So many people don't know about this one. It hasn't really been very well publicized, and it's been available since some point last year. I can't recall exactly when, but it's activated whenever there's an increase in alert level for at least 7 days. So for example, when Wellington had their little alert level increase a few months back, that was activated for businesses who were impacted by that. Likewise, when we had the Valentine's Day Auckland cluster as well, that was activated. And that's a payment of $1,500 per company plus $400 per full-time employee or equivalent. So for a lot of small businesses, that's not a huge amount of money. If you've got 10 employees, you're looking at sort of $5,500, which is not repayable, and it doesn't have any other kind of caveats attached to it. So that's activated and available once 7 days has passed in the increased alert level. So that actually became available yesterday, the 24th, 7 days in.
And that's focused on paying things like rents and other bills, overheads that you just can't cover with a wage subsidy.
Correct. And you cannot pass that on to shareholders, employees, and things like that. That's purely for covering operating expenses.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was watching the news last night, and the Auckland Chamber of Commerce were calling for that payment to be made weekly as opposed to this kind of one-off situation. Have you got a take on whether that should be in place? I mean, I guess costs don't stop after 1 week.
That's it. I'm interested to see whether another, lump becomes available, say, next Wednesday. I think we're all pretty certain that Auckland is going to be locked down for quite some time now. And if they're going to offer that for 1 week bursts that we have one off here and there, I do think that given this is lockdown number 5 or 6, something like that, in New Zealand, it's becoming too much for businesses to bear. And personally, I'm at the point where I feel that businesses are actually they're getting screwed now. And I think what a lot of the public don't realize is that if businesses are screwed, people are screwed, because businesses employ people. So I think the government does need to start focusing on how they're going to support the viability of businesses moving forward, and the resurgence support payment, as small as it is, for a lot of businesses, that can make a big difference. It can be the difference between remaining viable or forcing to close.
Should look, there were extra things that came in the business did last year because of the length of the first lockdown. Now, we're not sure if this one's going to go that long yet, but are there any other tips that you would give businesses that they should be looking at now for either other sources of income, other sources of assistance, or other ways to reduce costs? I know a lot of the advice last year was to talk to your landlord and see if you come to an arrangement with them, so on and so forth. What are you suggesting people do?
Certainly going through the same 3-step process, which I kind of was spouting and have been regurgitating since March last year. And that is, number 1, make sure that you go through absolutely all of the government financial support packages, like we've discussed, with a fine-tooth comb. Grab everyone that you can possibly grab that you're legitimately eligible for. Secondly, is to really take control of your financial information. And if you're not operating from some kind of forecast, now is the time to sit down with your bean counter and do it, because you need to be able to predict based on a worst case scenario how much money you're going to have in the bank on the 1st of November. Every business should know that, based on if they are unable to operate between now and then, or if they're operating on some kind of reduced revenue, which a lot of businesses are. Create that forecast, because that's what's going to empower you to be able to make really crucial decisions, and whether they're decisions around your premises, your staff. The issue that a lot of businesses are going to find now with landlords is that a lot of landlords might be just, mums and dads, families that have small commercial premises. They're not necessarily Bob Jones or James Kirkpatrick. So they're often a small business too. So they may be at the point where they're starting to struggle. So I wouldn't rely on being able to get rent relief in case you can't. And then thirdly, only when you've gone through those 2 steps, really looking at your operations and what can you change, what kind of payment terms can you rediscuss with your suppliers, or how can you get money in from your customers who have the ability to pay sooner. A lot of these things are not going to be very helpful for the automotive industry, but something that could be worthwhile looking at is, if you've got bank debt, can you reduce the principal payments and just pay interest only for a period of time? There are lots and lots of different factors that a business can look at operationally to help them get through. And that's where maybe some third-party input from, like you say, bank manager, accountant, someone like that can be really invaluable right now.
Now, those are all the things we've looked at in regards to what you can do for your business and what money you can get in. There is one other option that is out there, I believe, but it does involve taking on debt. And again, I'm going to see if I can get the name right here. Small Business Cashflow Scheme, the loans?
Scheme?
Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, I got the name right.
That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's it. And that first became available again, I can't recall when, middle of last year sometime, I think. And initially that was for a finite period, but they've made 2 massive changes to that. You can now get it twice. So if you've taken it out, paid it back, you can take it out again if you need to. And they've also opened up applications till the end of December 2023. So like 2 and a bit years away. And that is a repayable loan, and it runs over a term of 5 years. If you repay it within 2 years, you don't pay any interest. If you take longer than 2 years to pay it off, you pay, I think, 3% interest off the top of my head. And that amount is $10,000 plus $1,800 per full-time employee, up to a maximum of 50 full-time employees. So you can't get more than $50,000. I think that equates to.
Right.
So for a business that's got 10 staff, they're going to get $28,000 potentially as an interest-free loan.
Right. And is that something you think businesses should be looking for, or is it not really a great time to be going into?
I think it's absolutely fine to go for, as long as there's a plan around it. And that, excuse me, goes back to making sure that you're operating off a forecast, so that you've got a plan to be able to manage that debt. Just as if you were, going and buying a new truck or something like that, making sure you've got the capacity to repay it in the worst case scenario.
Fantastic. Look, I think we've covered off a whole pile of key systems there that people can use to help keep things afloat and moving and in good shape during lockdown. Now, Lani, if people want to get more information about what you do, or any other information you do put out there, what's the best places for them to go and find it?
Probably the easiest place during lockdown is to jump onto the Fogelberg Consulting Facebook page. And there's so many people active on social media at the moment, including myself. And if they would like a spreadsheet to help work out eligibility for the wage subsidy or the resurgence support payment, I've adopted one from business.govt.nz for all of the current calculations to help you determine whether you're eligible. So I'm happy to send that to anyone who needs it.
Fantastic. We'll put that link to that Facebook page at the bottom of this video on YouTube, or if you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the podcast notes there for you. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lani. That's Lani Fogelberg from Fogelberg Consulting. Don't forget, keep watching on YouTube, Facebook, on the AutoTalk website, and on my LinkedIn page for more videos. We're going to keep having one of these every business day for the foreseeable future, and keep tracking autotalk.co.nz for great business advice around this time. Thanks so much.
Cool. See ya.